Welcome to campus. My name is André. I'm the head of Campus São Paulo, and I lead Google for Entrepreneurs here in Brazil and Latam. And I'm very glad, it's an honor to host Diane Eisnor, who's the Director of Growth at Waze. So I met Diane last year. She was invited to give a keynote speaker, to be the keynote speaker at the Google for Entrepreneurs Partners Summit. So it's where most of Google for Entrepreneurs partners, they meet, and we have amazing speakers such as Eric Schmidt and Diane. So, yeah, slightly better. So Diane gave us this very insightful and impactful presentation about how Waze, which is a Google company now for a few years, what's their approach to growth, and how can you build a growth culture inside a startup and keep it as, let's say, a strong pillar within the culture. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Diane. She not only is the head of growth at Waze, but she was an entrepreneur before, and she confessed that one of the most interesting parts of her job is actually speaking to other entrepreneurs. So I hope she can enjoy as much as we do. She's also an angel investor. She has a fund along with rapper Lupe Fiasco with a very interesting investment thesis. She will talk about it. And she's a strong advocate of building great cultures, which include diversity, gender equality, and how we can scale that to other ecosystems. So with no further ado, please welcome Diane Eisnor.
Thank you. It's a little intimidating to have such a giant photo of yourself behind you. By the way, I've never seen myself so large. Okay, let's switch. There we go. So, welcome. Thanks for coming out to hear this. I was surprised to hear that it sold out within like 20 minutes of going live or something, so it's almost like Eric Schmidt or Bono or something. But I hope you walk away with some humble approaches to your own startups for growth. So, at Waze, everything we've always done, whether it's a product launch, a feature, a campaign, who we hire, comes back to the core mission of the company, which is to save people 5 minutes a day, every day. And this is something that has been since we first started, and it's kind of what we hold ourselves to, no matter what it is that we're doing. But in this talk, I'm going to look at the 5 principles of growth, the way that I have introduced them to Waze. And we hear the word growth in the mobile era very often. And I'm just going to give you some insights about what that means to our team. So the first thing, as Andre mentioned, is that growth is a culture. And growth for us is kind of the umbrella where we include everything that's connecting the mission to the community. So marketing, business development, the analytics, this all falls under growth. But underlying that is the entire rest of the company. So R&D, product, sales, everyone at Waze is impacting somehow the growth. And growth is the number of users, how engaged those users are, and how long they stay with us. And it wasn't always like that. We always had a culture of growth, but it wasn't always coordinated. And the interesting thing is that when it's not coordinated, very bad things happen. And so this is an example of push notifications that were sent. This is pretty old, but you get the idea. So this is how many push notifications we send. One of the analysts in the analytics team decided to make a small change in the radius, and it reduced by 65% all of the push notifications that were sent to our users. What do you think happened to our active user rate that month? Yeah. So it's critical that there is this common language around growth and that everybody feels like they're part of that mission. Then the second principle is a little more rigorous. It's about what it is that we focus on. What's the key metric for any point in time? How does that change throughout your growth? And the fact of the matter is that while the different things we choose to measure at any given point change, the funnel itself never has. And you all have your own funnel for your own startups. But I just want to walk through some examples of what have been our major. So this was a notion of the magic number. And we have in the product world a golden flow. right? It's what you want your users to be doing when they're in your app so that you know you're providing the best service, that you're spending your resources in the right way. Well, for us, that's a few features. That's, are you searching? Are you getting an ETA? And what we found is that at about 5 drives per month, everybody behaves the same. So this red line is 0 to 4. And then beyond that, you have 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 plus, and they all are exhibiting the same behavior. So our primary goal at that time, that magic number, was to get as many users as possible driving at least 5 times per month. Because we focused on that, we took it to, from something like 20x% to nearly 50% of users that were driving 5 times a month. And I can tell you all of the tactics we used to get there, right? Exposing features and that. But the point is, that was our single-minded job for about 6 months, was to make that happen. And then we moved on to velocity. Velocity, not just in general, but by country. So you can imagine that we're starting to get bigger, starting to scale more, and we need to understand in a more fine-grained way what's happening in each different country. And so you have countries that are growing only 5% and some that were growing 2,500%. And what that showed us is that we have to do different things in different countries where the velocity is different. So we really started focusing on the velocity and tried to bring the slow velocity companies up to the faster ones. And here's the funnel. This isn't going to be strange to many of you. It starts with awareness, which mostly we don't do, by the way. We have a broadcast program that starts to touch on that, but we've never done marketing in the traditional sense or in the brand awareness sense. We never bought TV advertising. We never had the money. And then you go into user acquisition. What are you doing on the app stores? How are you acquiring the new installs, the new registrations? And then it's about engagement. And the onboarding and into engagement. What is the process by which somebody gets into your app, understands how it works, or into your product, or uses your product, and make sure that you are, as much as possible, increasing the engagement if it's something that's going to be relevant to users. And in our case, you get in the car several times a day. We want to make sure that as much as possible, you're going to see that there's value in turning it on every time you get into the car. Retention, obviously, is how long people are going to stay. And so a lot is going into that. And then referrals. And you can see on the right how I think we're doing on each of these. Referrals, we've never really done anything with this. And so only now we're trying to surface this idea of when is it relevant to invite other people to the app? When is it relevant to share a drive with somebody? And really try to push on that. Another set of numbers that we look at, and this is an important one because it takes a forecast approach to how many users, how many kilometers per month we think we're going to have, and then how we think we're going to get there. Is it this feature? Is it that campaign? Is it X number of push notifications? How are we going to actually get there for the growth that we're expecting? And then if we don't hit it, why? And then we're looking at those numbers. So what we do is literally for every feature, for every campaign, we do what's called an expected outcomes analysis. And this is just a back-of-the-napkin prediction. Okay, 300,000 people in this market are going to use that feature. And we don't worry about getting it right, but we care a lot about measuring it at the end so that we can see and get smarter about what our users do and don't want to interact with. Okay, brings me to point number 3. Optimize and experiment relentlessly. And there was a time when we didn't do that, of course, but then it looks like this. You have no idea what you're doing. You just throw a bunch of stuff into the tornado and hope that users will fall out of the bottom. And this is how we behaved for many years, actually. But then we started trying to get much more rigorous, and we created an experimentation framework. Because every time you throw something into the top, that's your resources. That's time that you guys are spending. And we want to make sure that as much as possible as entrepreneurs, we have so little time. We want to optimize that everything we're doing is going to impact our user base in the right way. And this is really the difference between inches and miles. Inches for us is almost it's probably about 80% of what we do in growth. It's the small optimizations, those little inches that get you where you need to be. Little tweaks to the sign-in flow. Little tweaks to what audience you're sending what message to. And then, of course, about 20% of what we do is the miles, the big features, the sexy stuff. And so in the inches category has things like App Store optimization. What images am I showing on the App Store? And these seem like small things, but they can make a huge difference when you're really focused on the testing. And then last year, we did 72 experiments just in the ASO. This is also how are you optimizing for your paid media if you are lucky enough to have a budget. It's the feature sequencing. When you come into the product, what parts are you using? When should you surface what information so that people have the best experience and know what to do? So here's just an example of how we were getting smarter last year in terms of these experiments. So we kind of just started taking it seriously last year. That was our Q3 goal, blowing everything out of the water. But it was 72 experiments in 20 different languages, and we rolled out or graduated about 68% of these experiments. And that means that they were actually meaningful enough that we decided it was worth rolling them out. I'll give you one example, which seems arbitrary. This is the Waze icon that you see in the App Store. We decided, all right, let's try putting a flag on each one of them so that people feel like it's slightly more localized for them. It's kind of ridiculous, right? So 20% of this is like science and 80% is creativity. How do we come up with ideas of what to test? And here's what happened. Canadians like their flag so much that it increased organic installs by 12%. Even in Brazil, where we have so many users that a percent is a lot, it increased organic installs by 1%. So these very small inches can add up to make meaningful differences. Here's another example if we stick on, all right, so we took that learning and we said, all right, we need more in this localization process. What else can we do? And what we used to do is come up with English language, test that, ask the community to give us a translation back for it. And then we said, well, it's not really a one-to-one. Let's try getting 4 or 5 different translations back and then testing those. And this is the kind of impact that we saw just from that. So in Russia, again, these are all organic. This is just extra stuff. So 6% more installs in Russia, 3% more in Italy, just from making sure that we're trying to get closer and closer to that local experience. And I mean, this pretty much sums it up here. If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And that's something that we have to take very seriously because we're a global company, but we're trying to understand the behavior in local markets, and we have communities in each one of these areas, and it's something that once you pass a certain amount of early adopter growth, you really need to begin understanding your users better. For us, that geographic filter is very important. Once we saw that, we started looking at hyperlocal features. What do we need to put in the app that's not just about translations, but the driving experience and how that's different in different places? So we've done many things. One example is in Los Angeles. We used to ask you to take a left-hand turn into 6 lanes of oncoming traffic. So we heard from the community that that was dangerous, and then we were able to identify all of those areas and make the change. In Sao Paulo, there's license plate-based routing, which you guys know that, of course. We didn't. As soon as we found out, we rolled the feature out. And here's what's interesting. Sao Paulo, by the way, is our #1 city in the world in terms of monthly active users. So it's big enough to make an important investment in. So we took the engineering resources, we built this, and we had, of course, done our expected outcomes. Our expected outcomes analysis showed that we would have about 300,000 people in Sao Paulo using it per month. But look what we saw. It blew away our expectations. 1 million monthly active users after 1 month. In Sao Paulo only, were using this feature. 500,000 entered their license plate number immediately. So this is the kind of thing when you can understand a behavior. What's your connection in a local area to understand what's happening and what the needs are so that you can have that cycle, that feedback loop with your users. So this is super important for us. And of course, it's Brazil, so we keep doing it. But here's what just launched today. So there are some new regulations that say you have to use your headlights on the road. And so this is a gentle and kind of fun reminder to our user base. So this is the point, you know? It started by learning something on ASO that drove a big difference, and then we keep tweaking it and keep making it more and more of a local experience, and it's been important for us. All right, so that's enough about the inches. I think you get it. Now let's look at a couple of examples of the miles. The miles, of course, we can't spend a lot of time making new features and doing radical things, but here are a few examples where the investments paid off. So this is an early example of how we were measuring our push notifications that were sent out. Now, I'm sure any of you who are working in mobile know that push notifications are a catch-22. It's a very important channel for engaging with people, but if you annoy them, they're going to shut them off and you can never talk to them again. So this is something that we're very well aware of. Every single push notification that goes out is A/B tested to a very small percentage of people, and it has to drive not just active users. Oh, I opened the app. It has to drive drivers. So that means that it was actually valuable to the driving experience. And so this is just one example. You can see a push notification about Thanksgiving data and changes in driving patterns, what kind of engagement group, and if it impacted the active users and the drivers, and what was the lift. They only get rolled out if the lift includes drivers. And this is very rigorous. We do hundreds of different kinds of push notifications, and every single one is tested in this way. Distribution. Some of you may know or have seen on Global that we have a broadcast tool. So TV stations can use Waze to present their traffic information in the mornings. This was us launching in Argentina. And we went from number 50 in the App Store to number 1. That was the 2,500% velocity that you saw. It was just a snapshot in time. Velocity goes like this over the course of a year. Anyway, this distribution mechanism didn't take a lot of work. It was taking our product, making sure it was optimized for an iPad, and that the advertisers had some very, very basic add-ons so that they could use this for TV. And they get it for free. So now we're in 250 TV and radio stations around the world. And that's every morning or most mornings, we're getting this free publicity because we're able to provide a tool that we already had and find a way to use it every day. This was a mile for us. It opened us to a whole new audience. Another mile is the Transport SDK. Some of you may have seen it in your 99 Drivers app. But it's an app switching mechanism that's used by on-demand services, delivery companies, ride-sharing companies, and it's just a very easy way for them to have excellent routing and ETAs that it would be very costly for them to build themselves. This is a while ago. It's 7 live partners, but after a month, we had 4,000 who wanted to come in and join the program. That showed us that it was worth building up the extra effort and a scalable solution. So now we're starting to roll it out to everybody else. But it was representing, even at that time, almost 1% of driven kilometers around the world. Huge. Now it's up to 4% of driven kilometers. That's one of our key metrics, right? It's monthly active users, it's drivers, and driven kilometers. And so 4% is a huge number. That's a mile. This is an example of 99. They have areas where they train their drivers to use Waze because they really are motivated to make sure their drivers are using Waze because they'll get there faster, they can be more efficient. Another example is extending the use case. We're known for traffic, but we want to provide more value than that, right? We want to be able to tell you information about parking. And we want to help you even before your drive begins. This is when we rolled out the planned drives feature. So you can plan to go later, and this graph will show you how long it will take at different times of the day. About 40% of our users want to drive now. About 60% are using this feature. So it's really a mile for us. It's extending the number of times you would want to use Waze because you can check it the day before, not have to wait until you really want to go. Here's an example of a push notification. These are all different messages. The one in green is the message about planned drives. So you can see some performances of things that we tested, some messages, and look at the difference between planned drive and whatever was above it. We were testing a bunch of different features. Just in a push notification, what do people want? 6% actually opened the app from that, like actually active users. 0.5% additional drove just from a push notification. So these are the numbers that we like to see, and it just, for us, helped really instill this idea that when you do a mile, if you can extend your use case, that's a pretty big deal. Okay, that's all the kind of real stuff. Now let's go inside of what it looks like inside of a startup from an operational and cultural perspective. First of all, rebel against yourself. How many of you have had the conversation between the head of product and the CEO or the head of engineering where you're saying, what should we launch? I like this feature. Well, no, I like this feature. Well, that one's never going to work. All right, right. How many hours have you wasted doing that? I wasted a lot. And now we just say, okay, we'll test it. So a perfect example is the sign-up flow. This is the old Waze sign-up flow, and I don't know if any of you joined Waze at this time. If you did, I'm terribly sorry. Please, all right, here's all the rules, and then give us your phone number, and then wait for an SMS code, and then enter it in, and then can you please create a Facebook profile, and then can you do this and this and this. I don't even know what the heck that's talking about. And I haven't even known what the app is for yet. It's like, yeah, it's like getting married before you go on your first date. So we said, all right, let's just try the short one. I know that you UX gods say that we're going to be able to have better users if we have the long flow. If they've made it through, they're going to drive more. Okay, test. Not only did 77% actually finish the sign-in flow, but an extra 10% drove. Now we never have to have that conversation again about the quality of users. So the whole dynamic changes when you're not just talking about my idea, but all right, let's test it. It's all fun and fine, and test it on 10% of the users. If it works, fine, roll it out. If it doesn't, okay, fine too. The data leads. And then next, what is the point of all of this data? Obviously, one point is in scaling your app and getting your numbers and getting funded and all that great stuff. But what else can you be doing with it? And for us, this was a meaningful change in our business. I'm going to show you one video about a program that we call Connected Citizens program. And the very first partner we had in this program was Mayor Pais of Rio. He was getting ready for the Pope to visit in 2013, and he told his team, get Waze inside of the Traffic Management Center ASAP. There was no way to keep track of what was happening where inside of the traffic center in this kind of live way. So we tested it out, it worked. We had one of our map editors there on site because we couldn't close the roads in the app before the Pope arrived because it was a security risk. We had to close the roads only when he was right there. So one of our community members literally sat there and closed the roads on the app as it was safe for that to happen with the Pope. And that was the beginning of this. When Waze first launched, its core was about outsmarting traffic together. CCP is the next natural evolution of Waze. Now we're really talking about saving time for millions of people.
Our drivers are out on the streets every hour of every day, reporting the most accurate information on closures and congestion. We are taking that information and delivering it to the government officials who can address incidents in real time.
This is a real program with real impact. We're actually sitting down with partners and having measurable results every day.
Boston is a city of around 600,000 residents, but during a typical workday, we grow to over 1 million people. Waze has allowed us to rapidly iterate through experiments to see what sort of effect interventions have on congestion and traffic.
We had a major snow last March. Seeing the data come in from Waze every 2 minutes allows us to grab user reports, and then we can respond to those reports in a timely manner.
Genesis is a software company that provides solutions to help first responders. By putting Waze inside our Genesis Pulse product, our first responders are saving 5 minutes, and that saves lives.
We didn't expect that so quickly we would have cities redistributing traffic personnel, that we would have 911 systems relying on this data.
As more data comes online, Waze is proud to bring together innovative transportation leaders from all around the world to develop the next chapter in traffic management.
At the core, CCP has the same mission as Waze, which is to save people time every day. It's showing us what our new goals are going to be. New forms of safety, new forms of urban mobility, helping cities become a lab for making lives better. just with data we already had. So now we have, so in 2013, Rio was our first. Now we have over 200 of these city governments that are our partners, and it represents almost 1 billion citizens that now have access to that information. Just give you a couple more case studies about what else you can do with this data. So this is Jakarta. 2 million people commute every morning to get to work. And they wanted to change their policy. They instituted something that they learned from Sao Paulo, which was license plate-based routing. Their old system wasn't working. And because they could measure what was happening, it only took them 1 month to do a trial and then roll it out across the city. That alone reduced travel time in the morning by 19%. And it actually looks like that. Okay, before the Olympics, Rio needed to prepare for 1 million new visitors of a city that was capable of handling 6.3 million. And that needed to be a much bigger change. So again, using our data, they tried to figure out where are we going to add new roads. Their road capacity was just done. So what they did was they added 3 new highways using this data. And again, you hope you know if a piece of very expensive infrastructure is going to be effective, but most people don't know. But now that they have data, they have no excuse. 27% decrease in congestion during morning commute from that, and they know right away. So it used to be that you would do a pilot in one city, and then over some years, maybe you would say, okay, well, I think it works, it feels better. Or you have someone out counting cars or something like that, and maybe roll it out. We're entering an era because of this data where you can roll out a pilot in one city and not just roll it out in its city, but anywhere else in the world because you can tell if it's working or not. All right, let's talk about emergency services for a second. So that's traffic. 70% of crashes in the US come into the Waze app before the 911 system. 70%. 30,000 crashes a day, 70% coming into Waze first. And as you heard a little bit, the emergency responders feel like that means that they're saving between 4 and 7 minutes responding to any incident. So there's some real safety implications here as well. So the idea is that we go from this big goal of 5 minutes a day every day, and now because of this data, we can look at saving millions of hours every day because we're looking at city scale. This is an example that of our city partners. 175 of our partners got together in Paris last year, and it's incredible to watch this community form. They're sharing case studies, they're actually sharing code, and they're learning together as a group, not just in sharing the data, which is important, but you need that human connection as well, and as Waze, that's something that we've always done. So just to recap quickly, these are the 5 principles. And in terms of how we use them, I'm sure you can have your own, but I hope something will help inform. So growth is a culture. Key metrics change, but the funnels don't, unless you pivot. Optimize and experiment relentlessly. Rebel against yourselves. And then what's the point? What else can you be doing with what you've got? And I want to leave you with one important point, which is that as entrepreneurs, we are doing something very special. When we think of growth, we tend to think of scaling our users, scaling our revenue, all super important stuff, but maybe we're also building cultures that are worth scaling. I don't know if many of you have been reading about the cultures or some of the very nasty cultures that are being exposed in Silicon Valley right now, but that's not why I moved to the Valley, and I don't think that's why you guys sitting in this room are creating your companies. So just nice to keep in mind is scaling users, growing revenue, and hopefully growing a culture. Thank you.
So Diane, thank you so much. Very insightful. Oh my God, you're gonna get so many emails now.
Please don't expect a response till I get home. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna have a fireside chat, and of course, we're gonna be opening for questions. So this tiny box here is a microphone. So when we open up for questions, I will gently throw it at you. And I will ask you to say your names and very objectively ask your question, okay? And that can also, or not include, can I have a new feature like this? Or can you put my street is wrong or something like that?
I was expecting that, actually.
Yeah. Just kidding. So Diane, thank you again. And we had the pleasure of, maybe 4 months ago, hosting Noan, who is the CEO of Waze. And I started with a question that I have to ask you. So, did you come here by car? How was traffic in São Paulo?
We actually came here by 99, and we carpooled with the three of us in a 99 to get here, and it wasn't that bad. I've been in much worse in São Paulo, but this was okay. 20 minutes. Yeah.
And how many of you guys here at the audience use Waze?
Yeah.
It's like okay, it's a pretty compelling audience. And I think one of the most interesting parts of Waze is actually that it's a community-driven product. And from the very first day, it's how you built and how you had your business model embedded to the product. My first question is, how can you keep growth as a pillar of a company and not lose the community focus that you had so far?
First of all, without the community, we couldn't scale. We are still a very small team of less than 350 people. And you can see all of the work we're doing. But it's because we have local community members in every one of these areas that are telling us when there's a new regulation, telling us when there's a road closure due to a flood, a fire, a protest, carnival. Maybe that's a bad example for today. Anyway, but we're learning about that information. It's being surfaced by having those local people on the ground. So in a way, we couldn't get where we are at all without them. And it's this, so we've built ourselves to be able to scale that way as well. Like, we can't go further without that dialogue.
That's great. And one other thing that I find very interesting is this relentless experimentation that you mentioned. You've been part of Google, you are a 300 people team. Google is now a almost 60,000 people company. How can you become, or how can you not become, in a way, slowed down by a huge company and keep the spirit of moving fast and eventually breaking things without losing track of, let's say, the user and, of course, the value that you need to provide? How's life after being part of a big company?
Before we completed the acquisition, we had the conversation about the importance of autonomy. And I have to say, Google has been amazing at sticking to their promises and keeping us autonomous. We did our part by making sure we continued to grow, that we were making money, that we were doing all of that. But our deal is we keep doing a good job and we keep staying autonomous. And that's just the way it's been. Google is fantastic. I mean, you probably saw that we're coming out on Android Auto. There are plenty of places for us to partner inside that's been helpful. But for the most part, our day-to-day, we're just a very small team with our heads down doing our own thing. In the beginning, it took some, how do I say this? Well, I don't know another word. It took some fighting to maintain that autonomy, right? You have to kind of shield yourself and set the expectation. But we did, and I think it's going very well. We're very happy post-acquisition.
Great. Guys, I'm going to open up for questions. So who has the first question from the audience? Don't be shy. Okay, let's start here.
Okay, hello. I have to open this up?
No.
All right. Hello, guys. How are you doing? My question for you is very simple. Actually, it's one for you personally and another one for the company. What's community for you and what's community for Waze?
When we say community first, we mean the 500,000 map editors around the world that are helping make our service better. It also means the 500 of those map editors that have us on WhatsApp and are telling us when we really need to focus on something and that are doing the heavy lifting. Community, it's funny, I've been thinking, as I mentioned, a lot about culture. And I think that the culture you have on the inside, the kind of relationships that you have inside of your company, seep out. And I mean, our users feel like they are connected to something bigger than themselves. And it's two things, right? We have this tension. On the one hand, you feel like you're doing good. People want to do good. They just want it to be really easy. And it's very easy. You drive, and you're giving information to ways that are going to help other people get around. At the same time, you're getting there faster than everybody else. So there's this like nice what's in it for me component as well. But Nevertheless, they feel connected to something greater. So that's also an extension of community. But there's this idea, I don't know if you guys are familiar, it's more from the Enlightenment and the Renaissance guys, but it's about social contract. And what is the implicit relationship you have with your employees? Like, what do you say about your relationship without saying? And for us, it's the same internally as it is externally. So community to me means how you're treating people related to your product. Are you being honest? Are you being open? So in a sense, when Waze says it, we mean that very specific group of people. When I'm talking about it in a broad sense like this, it's part of our culture. It's a core part of our culture that extends to everything internally and externally.
Does it have to move?
Oh, careful.
Hi, Daniel. My name is Daniel. I'd like to know if you oversee revenues, and if yes...
Can you speak a little closer?
I would like to see, my name is Daniel, I'd like to know if you pay some attention to growth of revenues, and if yes, what are the main bottlenecks for the revenue growth in Waze?
So on the revenue side, it's interesting. We wanted to make sure that our whole ad platform that we were building was additive to the user experience, that they were things that really worked well together in an ecosystem. And it took some time. At this point, the revenue growth is fueled by a couple of things. One is making sure we have a clear positioning in the market about why it's different. Making sure that we have, I mean, we used to have like one guy doing ads, and now we have these beautiful offices in different countries, and we can really make sure that people understand what it is that we're offering and why it's different. But the other thing, do you want to add anything about revenue growth? I'll tell you the number one barrier is when there's slow user growth. If everyone here is using Waze as a consumer, you want to buy ads there. If we go into a market where user growth is very slow, they're like, what is this Waze thing, and why would I spend money on it? So our number one barrier to revenue growth is user growth.
Hello, my name is Andre, and I'd like to know a little bit about the differences in the cities for you. You mentioned the importance of hyper-local activities and tweaks. So how similar or different are the cities all around the world, considering the difference of cultures and language and all of that, to your operation and solutions?
Every country is different in some way. And there's the blunt version of that, which is that we've never been able to be successful in Germany. I mean, if you look at our app, you could see... oh, it's kind of a mess, it's so silly, where are they taking me, it's not right, it's chatting with me. And if you are from a culture that's much more serious, has a different expectation, it might not be the kind of thing you gravitate towards. If you're in a place like Brazil, maybe you're like, hey, I know what's going on, I feel informed. There is a cultural connection that resonates more strongly in some countries than other countries. In terms of the nuances, we tend to wait to see if there is organic traction, organic growth in a specific market before we'll go in and fan the flames. But we only really invest in a market that we think has really huge potential. And as I mentioned, Sao Paulo is our number one city, but Brazil is our number 2 country in the whole world after the US. So it's worth investing in that way. And we see tremendous penetration and growth in Indonesia, in France, in Italy. And so where we both have potential to grow and some kind of existing spark, that's where we go in and focus, and then that's where we'll invest in more localized features, etc. But these features are also extensible. So what we did in Brazil with the license plate routing, we're now rolling that out to 7 other countries. So in one way, it's like a lab, and then you can figure out where else you can go. Has anyone ever been injured in this process? I have a question for you.
No, but I think twice we had like the microphone kind of
break.
Yeah.
But I'm okay. Hi, I'm Gustavo. Regarding Waze and Google Maps, how do you see it? Are you parent companies? Are you, is there a symbiosis? How do you see it now and in the future?
Like I said, we're autonomous on the one hand. So our product teams are not working together, right? We're each trying to craft something that is resonating and helping ourselves grow. There are places where it makes a lot of sense for us to help each other more on the data side. So we have taken, for example, some of their base maps in areas where we didn't have very good ones, like India. We use the Google Maps India base map. And we've given them some of our incident data, for example. So there are ways to connect on the data side where it's really beneficial. We have a very open relationship there. And then for the rest, it's just about keep your head down, build a great product, and there's no strategy about how we work together or what we build. We're both committed more to our users than to each other. But I think the symbiosis is that we really challenge each other to make great products.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Paulo. Please, I would like to know how Waze looks at political problems in each country. One. Second, how do you see the psychological implications in using Waze? If we have a blackout today, I don't get back my home.
Can cause dependency.
In a zombie apocalypse, we're all in trouble. We won't be able to tweet it. No, I mean, this is actually, it's an interesting question that I think about from time to time. But psychologically, we are becoming more reliant on technology. It's embedded into everything we do, whether it's navigation or how we communicate with our children or how we decide what school to go to. And I sometimes think about the implications of that dependence and reliance on technology in the form of what backup systems do we need? Should we be having generators, solar power? But I tend to think about that in the basket of what are we doing from an energy perspective to help sustain in that. Yeah, that's it. What was the first part of the question?
What's the biggest barriers, political-wise, you mentioned?
Oh, politically. We try to stay out of it. We try to follow the laws. Always, right? So this headlight thing you saw was a regulation. Certain countries have different regulations where how you can show police, but politically, we don't take sides. We try not to engage in politics at all.
Sorry, that means you are completely neutral.
I hope so. Did you? Unless you know something I don't know. By the way, this would be the time that we would be getting in trouble, but we're not. We're being from the U.S. We could be getting ourselves into trouble, but we're not. We're very nicely playing with everybody.
I build up on that question to talk about connected cities.
Yeah.
So it's great to see the amount and the growth in terms of how many cities are already connected to Waze. But as you see in terms of capabilities within local government, what is the biggest challenge? What is the biggest barrier for them to connect to what Waze can offer as a technology to increase or to improve people's lives in an urban space?
Last year, the city of Boston was sending us faxes every time they had a road closure. We didn't know how to receive them. So there are different levels of technology savvy in every one of these governments, and I mean radically different. So I think getting to some kind of basic stabilized ability to handle data through a feed, and we've come up with a standardized specification for feeds. So everyone, no matter what your level of technical prowess, except for fax, it works for exchanging the data. I think the next big hurdle and exciting opportunity for cities especially is, do they have a data analyst? Do they have someone who can take this information and know what it means and respond to it? Because your citizens are now expecting action. They're willing to share this with you, but what are you going to do about it? And so the data analyst component I see being one of the most important jobs in city government for the years to come. There's so many.
Can somebody just throw it? Can you talk on the box?
Yeah.
Because of the live stream?
Hello.
Thank you.
My name is Natalie. I work at São Paulo City Hall at the Secretariat for Innovation and Technology, and I just checked out the list of cities, and we are not one of the cities in Connected Citizens. How is that so? Because you mentioned that we are the largest market in the world, so what are the difficulties? Or
see me when we're not being live streamed. If we were not being live streamed, I would tell you something right now. No, I can't.
We are.
I know. Don't worry.
But just worth mentioning. So when no one was here, was right after elections, and I believe he met the current mayor, right?
Yeah.
Around that time. Yeah. The new mayor.
Okay.
Next question.
I'm Henry. In the early days of Waze, how did you engineer growth and go from 0 to such an active community?
Completely ad hoc and off the cuff and blindly. I'll tell you, in the very beginning, certain things worked. And let me tell you first about the product. And when we first started, we couldn't come out and say we were a traffic app. We're this great traffic app. So our first release of the product, and I don't even think it was in Brazil, it was a blank map, and you could see yourself driving. And that got featured by the App Store. And it got featured because it was this weird thing that no one ever saw before, but people loved. And so my approach to growth, even in the early days, we didn't even call it growth then, was it's better to have a handful of very engaged, loyal users to help you understand than have lots of people who are just going in and out. And so for me, it's really about that. How do you create this product market fit? How do you create that deep engagement and that deep connection with your first users and then keep iterating?
We have a question down here. Are you a good thrower?
Okay.
Duck.
Whoa.
Well done.
Okay. Oops, sorry. I'm so happy that people previously made some political questions because I've been living mostly in Jerusalem, and there are just kind of rumors, with the taxi drivers. They know everything about the city.
What?
Like the taxi drivers in Jerusalem, they usually know more than everybody else. And since the acquisition, they keep saying that Waze was just acquired, so Google Maps could be better. And we have been noticing as users that eventually, unfortunately, the political situation of roadblocks and some neighborhoods we cannot go, it's been turning out that usually the Jewish or Israeli community just use more Waze and everybody else just use Google Maps, and you can see the routes being different. So in other cities, unfortunately, Israel is not the only situation that such situation happens. How do you guys manage these differences in data?
So this happens a lot in mapping, where you might have people on two sides of a border with very different ideas about what routes are safe or whatever. And so for this, we do rely a lot on the community. And the very least is trying to have enough people on the ground that if a road is closed, we'll have it first. If a bridge is closed, we'll have it first. If a protest breaks out, we'll have it first. So all we can do is build systems and hope that we are able, no matter which side of that line you're on, that both sets of people are willing to share information with us. And again, it's not political. It's really just about what is happening on the roads and how do we get it to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. And there are places where it's, it gets complicated, and that's one for sure. And it changes. These are dynamic. In one neighborhood, it might be dangerous today and not on another day. So again, it requires that community on the ground to keep giving us feedback. I think we're always getting better. We can always improve. I don't think anyone can have 100% know everything that's going on, but we really aspire to get as close to 100% as possible.
Hello, my name is Liao. I'm a professor and an entrepreneur. As an entrepreneur, I have my CFO, I have my CTO. Based on your experience, when is not the right time, but a good time to have a growth director?
So Not because I am one, but I would say as early as possible. And this is because if you don't, you're going to have to back into tracking and systems on legacy. You won't be able to have that culture of growth. So I think very early. Now, if you're short on money, right, that doesn't mean it has to be an expensive head. Like, I didn't come in as the growth director. I came in as the lady who was starting the U.S. office of Waze. And then I've always just taken on whatever we needed to do at that time. I launched the ads platform. Whatever it is that we need, I'm like that one. So whoever in your organization currently who could take on the role of growth advocate or at least have a baseline of data, that's what you need. Immediately is a data analyst, but then someone on your senior early team who is the advocate for growth. I think that's what you need. Not necessarily to pay someone X, but someone who understands data, gets you the right systems, and then your senior level advocate.
Can I just take the opportunity to ask a question from somebody from the live stream? So Pablo is asking about competitive advantages of Waze in a changing industry, such as automotive industry. And I remember, so Nolan was here, and he said something that was very striking to me. It was like, probably his kids, our kids, will find very strange that we owned cars, right? Or that we drove
them ourselves.
Yeah, we drove them ourselves, right? So what's Waze's position? How can you take advantage of your position today in this disrupting industry of tomorrow?
First of all, it's an area I study a lot and am literally so excited about. If you look at LA County, 40% of the current square footage of the whole county goes to supporting current car culture. 2 cars per household, cars parked 95% of the time. And this whole model is being turned upside down right now, which is a very good thing. That means that with electric vehicles, with car sharing, with ride sharing, with autonomy, with new kinds of vehicles, the shape of our cities is going to change. Literally within the next 10 to 20 years, our cities will look different, and the infrastructure we need is going to be completely different. So for us, one of the very important things that we do is related to the Connected Citizens program. We get all of these governments together. I just hosted a conversation 2 weeks ago with 10 US CCP partners about the Trump announcement that we're going to spend $1 trillion in infrastructure. Because we want to discuss where is the best place to put that money now where it's not throwaway. Knowing that all of these changes are coming, how are we going to make future investments in our infrastructure? How much of it is data versus physical? What are our roads going to look like? Are our parking lots going to be converted into something else? And so we're very much involved in all of those conversations about the changing of our cities. And then on the vehicle side, it's very cool because autonomy is the PC. Right? It is the hardware. It is not that interesting, actually, because it's all going to be autonomous, right? We know that. It's there. It's like the CD player or something. What's interesting are the services that it enables. And, can a highway, instead of dividing a city, be some kind of bridge that's bringing people together with this? And vehicles are interesting because we talk a lot about moving humans, but in moving objects, we might have vehicles that are, there's a chef instead of a driver, and they're making the food while it's being delivered to you. We might have one with lightweight manufacturing where you're building the goods while it's being delivered to you. I call that moving spaces instead of just, here I am at point A, we're going to point B. The idea that instead of having one huge transit system, we can have micro hubs that are distributed to all the neighborhoods that need it, and that they can move. Right? In Barcelona, 60,000 people come to Mobile World Congress every year, and every year there's a taxi strike, the buses break down. Like, why can they never respond to that? Well, our cities of the future, enabled by autonomy, will have services that allow them to do that. Very, very exciting time, and I think there's no better place than to be right in the middle of all these cities coming up with ideas for these services and the shapes.
Can you throw the mic back? Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Reinaldo. Last year, Waze had a problem to information the wrong way in Rio de Janeiro. At least 3 people were killed. Did Waze get the solution, and how conduct this to get the solution?
It's a very good question. So There is, in some countries and in some cities, a very serious public safety issue related to what's happening in our neighborhoods. Then you have these apps coming in, and what is the role of these apps? I'll tell you what we did in the case of Rio, and it's tricky because some people might say, comunidad is dangerous, don't route people there. And you know what? It's not the case. Because I could be a small business owner, I could live there, and we wanted to make sure that whatever our solution was going to be, it was just. It was a fair solution and not penalizing people because they were poor. So what we did was we found a data set of high crime areas. And it's from Disque Denuncia, and these high crime areas are now plotted in Waze and updated, and not just any crime, by the way, because people are robbed everywhere in Rio, but where there's violent crime, homicides, this kind of thing. And so now, if you route through it, you'll get a pop-up saying, you're about to enter, or this route is on a high crime area, do you still want to go? Last year, we had 10,000 people taking those routes. After we implemented that, it's down to 2,000. So it's making a big difference. The problem is getting access to this crime data. You can't get it from most governments, and this is not a Brazil-specific thing, but do they want to advertise how much crime is going on in their cities? Do they want that to be an advertisement? So who provides that data? So we're actively looking for, you provide it? Hot dog. All right, done. Let's all just go home. Done. Finished. Then anyway.
My name is Marcio. I have a question about natural disasters, how Waze is working all over the world with predictive analytics, something like that, and how do you foresee the future on this type of social impact that is a service for many people?
This is also a topic that I love. What do you do in a crisis? What do you do in a natural disaster? And the reason I love it, because it goes back to the fact that you need to have community on the ground telling you what's happening. In many cases, the government doesn't know even what's happening and where. I'll give you one example from very early on during Hurricane Sandy in the US. We got a call from the White House one day, and this was like in 2010 or something. And what they said was, there's a fuel crisis, and we don't know where to send fuel trucks. We're hearing rumors that there's lines that are super long. We started getting information from our community members, but it wasn't enough because we were talking about many boroughs here and then outlying cities. So we sent a push notification to everyone in the area and asked them if they found a gas station that was open, and if so, how long the lines were. We got 10,000 responses. FEMA, our emergency management service, used that information to send fuel trucks to end the fuel crisis. So it's about how much access can you have to this information no matter where it is. We do a pretty good job, actually. When there's a natural disaster, when something happens, one of our community members scrambles to figure out where our shelters. We immediately, no matter what time of day, put it up online, and we can navigate you to a shelter immediately. We also have a scenario that goes into play where you just search help, and that will also bring up the shelters or things nearby, roads that are closed. But it's still fairly manual, but it goes back to the fact that it's important to have people on the ground willing to share that info.
For instance, recently we had in, I believe it was California, that the barrier of water resource has crashed and something, and the government alerted many people to drive out of the city. And how Waze acted in an example like that?
So I'll tell you how I think it probably acted, because I don't have the data in front of me, but it probably acted that because we already have partners there throughout California, we probably got access to the data. We probably closed the road as soon as the road closure came in through the feed, and probably routed people around it. Now, things do slip through the cracks. If we didn't have access to that information, we wouldn't have done it. But in cases like that, we should have had enough of a community on the ground.
Diane, I have a question here, actually two questions. One is from Eugenio. So before Google's acquisition, what was Waze's business model at that time? And the second from Murilo, he's talking about what are the main tasks of communication and growth teams in terms of creating and fostering community culture.
So before the acquisition, our revenue model was location-guided advertising, right? Again, additive, trying to make it so you're on your way from one place to another, and that we can try to add some value to you. You want to get some coffee on the way to work, et cetera. Post-acquisition, it's location-guided advertising, and we just are a little more mature at it. What was the second part?
What are the main tasks of the communications and growth teams focused on community growth?
Yeah. So communications is kind of part of the overall growth team. And what is it in terms of community? But there is a community team that's not part of the growth team that really deals with a lot of like making sure that the map editor product is solid and all of that. But the community is just part of everything we do. So whenever I'm like with all of our city partners, our map editors are there as well. Our community they have meetups, we go. Like I said, a lot of the ones who have been around for a long time have me on WhatsApp and they tell me, what I should be doing, how I should spend my time. They're just part of the extended Waze family. So there's no like, the growth team interacts with the community like X. We don't have those kind of guidelines.
Guys, we have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, my name is Bruno, and recently we are seeing a lot of information about a partnership that you guys and Spotify are doing. So what made you think that a partnership like this is what was missing to Waze got even bigger than you are now?
So if you think about the context of what people are doing when they're driving, the music is the only other thing. So it's kind of this like peanut butter and chocolate moment. And they were starting to get more refined in their efforts as well. So they launched fitness first, so they could actually tell with the sensors on the phone if you were running or if you were exercising. So turns out they can also tell if you're driving. And then I just happened to meet the GM of Spotify, and we're like, hey, chocolate and peanut butter, let's do this. Literally, that's how it evolved. It took a year. But.
Hello, my name is Giovanni. I want to know is there any political implication between the government and because the radar feature of the app?
Government and?
Showing the velocities, radars, cameras.
The radar, speed, yeah.
For the most part, not really. There are certain governments, again, where that's against the law to show. So we always follow the law, no matter what. If it's not part of the law, we show it anyway because it's important to our users. They like the experience. I've had many conversations with police chiefs and all kind of people and mayors. And for the most part, they really don't mind. They want people to slow down. And so having it on the map has a better chance of getting them to actually slow down. So if people are focused on safety, they usually don't mind. I have had conversations with some police departments that I guess something was reported once during an undercover operation about police being there, but apparently they were wearing uniforms and they were in a marked police car. So we have to kind of, you have to take that with a grain of reality. Yeah.
Okay, and there's one final question which I found very interesting from José here. So he's talking about how the infrastructure, the network infrastructure in Brazil is still in construction, and how that can actually have impact on users' experience when using apps and so on. So what suggestion could you give to developers to overcome that hurdle and still have an amazing user experience while using apps?
In terms of making sure that you're not using too much data?
Yeah. How does Waze comply to that here?
So we do know when you're on Wi-Fi versus a data connection. And obviously as much as you can recommend to your users to download if it's a heavy app while they're on Wi-Fi, that would be helpful. There are also things that we can't do as Google anymore, but that a startup can probably do, which is is there a reason or an opportunity for carrier partnerships where the carriers could offer 0 rating for some period of time? And that's something that we have to be very, very careful not to do anything that even smells like net neutrality issues. But for a startup, it's really not net neutrality. It could be great for the carrier to expose a new opportunity to people, and great for a startup to be able to get more people because the data is free.
So one final question, and I remember you mentioned that when you were in Campus Madrid, people asked you this question, so I'm going to repeat it because I think it's really good. So if you could go back in time in your history at Waze, what would you do different?
Okay, so you know what happened when they asked me that question? I went home and I reorged my team. I did, really. And it's because, but now I know the answer because I just did it. We had kind of backed into this notion of growth based on what we needed, and we just huddled everybody together, and we're a very charming group, so we got everybody on board and the whole company, and we're very collaborative. But when they asked me, what would you do differently, I realized that if I were advising them, I would say hire the data analysts first. Don't worry about the marketing. Don't worry about the biz dev. Get your data analysts in first and really get it so that you understand those inches and you understand those even very immature A/B testing solutions. And we would have started that way if we started today. I think if I can come up with something new, what would I do differently? I don't know, that's a good one.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Guys, so Diane, thank you so much for your time. So Diane is here for a Google for Brazil event. I'm very, very thankful for taking the time to come talk to entrepreneurs here. And yeah, just keep using Waze, guys. Okay, thank you so much.